Thank you for joining us for our last session of this great conference, symposium. I would like to introduce to you our speaker this afternoon, Dr. Ruth Newberry. And Dr. Newberry has a PhD in English and a background in curriculum development, learner assessment, pedagogy, and retention. She has also won 2 teaching awards, a Presidential Award for Service, the Sloan C Certificate of Online Learning, a Sloan C Best in Track Award for Student Services. We're very honored to have her with us at this symposium. She's our Blackboard expert and will be speaking to us today about using Blackboard analytics for insight and action in teaching, learning, and assessment. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Dr. Newberry.
Thank you very much. All right. Do you all have your cup of coffee? I hope so. Good. Caffeine it's after lunch. We might need that caffeine. So thank you. Yes, we're going to use this third presentation. We've just been digging deeper and deeper into teaching and learning, and now we're going to be talking about it from a data analytics, learner analytics perspective. My background is in literature, so I often wonder, why am I talking about data points and things like that? That's not usually the way I think of the world. I think of paragraphs, not graphs and charts. But I have, over the years, come to see, and especially in the world of assessment, we do have to rely on data and percentages, things like that to help us make decisions. So I would like to, again, for those of you that were here yesterday, one of the dispositions that Charles mentioned for faculty teaching, blended courses, online courses, and I would say really any course, is this idea of data practices. You know, being able to gather information, various formats, but gather that information that's going to help you make informed decisions, because often, and I'm guilty of this myself, you kind of have an intuition about how things are going, but don't always have the actual hard data to back that up. And what I'd also like is to take, I really like this phrase he came up with, the 3 A's. Let's ask, and that also follows up on what you had said earlier, Dr. Hassan, and that is, what do you need to know? That's what we need from all of you, is what's the questions you have about your teaching, about student learning, about the course that you would like to know. And actually, you should all have a 3x5 card right now and have to write that out. We didn't plan well. Should have done that. So that we can help get the reports or find the sources for that data so that we can get you the data, and then you can begin to look at it, analyze it, figure out what it means, what's behind it, and if it's answering your question or not. Sometimes the initial question we ask isn't the right question, but it leads us to other questions. But the whole point, again, as I started this morning with the assessment, talking about assessment at the program and institutional level, it's all about improving student learning. And that's what we want to be able to do with the data that we get. So again, borrowing from Charles's presentation yesterday, when he talked about data practices, he broke it into these 4 areas. Being able to inform ourselves about student learning goals, being able to inform ourselves about student activity and engagement, being able to understand how students are engaging in course content and materials, and how that may play into the first two items there, how that helps with learning goals and activity, and then how we can get answers to questions, make decisions around improvement of assessments. And this time when I talk about assessments, we're really talking about learning activities in the course. So we're back to the course level. So when there are many ways that you can get data out of Blackboard. One of them is an analytics tool, application really, often called A4L for short. And it is, think of it as like any application, Blackboard itself is an application. This connects to Blackboard, and in that connection, it is pulling certain pieces of data out about what our students are doing, what faculty are doing, what's happening in the courses, the different features, and all of those things. But it also, because it's a standalone application, can also pull data from other sources, most commonly the student information system. And so now we can start getting demographics. We can start getting information about who the student is, what their program is, what we know about that student, maybe their overall QPA, maybe about the scores that they brought in as they came to the university, other types of whatever is stored in that SIS system. It can also connect to other systems that a university might have, because what it is a big data warehouse. And so it's pulling from these different areas, and then in that data warehouse and through the reports, you can start getting the information out. Now, I am going to tell you up front that I really should have a colleague here standing next to me who is an analytics expert, and I think you've all met, many of you have met him, Hamam Saeed. Unfortunately, he could not be with us today. So I am somewhat taking his guidance on important things from his perspective and working with institutions on the analytics system. When I work with assessment, typically the analytics is the very next step. Not until we start really gathering program and institutional assessment data do we then add in the analytics piece and start putting together a much bigger picture. And in some ways, that's my handoff to another consultant. But I've also come to recognize that this is really a critical piece to the overall assessment practices that we, and by we, I mean Blackboard, have not been good at making that connection. In fact, our clients have done it better than we have. And so I've become very interested in how analytics can help from an assessment perspective particularly. But in Blackboard, there are several types of reports. One is standard reports. You can create them, you can push them out, they become available to either a select group of people or everyone on campus. These four here are that type of report. They're built right into the course. Everybody can run them and use them. Then there's a second level of reports that are generated through a tool called Pyramid, and that is a special report query tool. And that's where you can begin to really drill down if you need to go beyond what you have here, and or use Pyramid to generate the structure of a report that then can become a standard report. Okay? So these here are really the ones that we've been talking about. And if you saw Dr. Hassan's presentation earlier, he did a great job of showing how, for him and his course, these have been extremely valuable pieces of information for understanding how his students are using the course, how they're engaging with the material, how they're learning in the course over the 10 weeks that he has them. So let me just take them one by one initially, and after each one, let's kind of stop for a moment, and I'd like you to think about how would you use this report, and then also what's missing maybe from this report from your perspective, your discipline. Okay? So, course, the analytics report, this first one, Course at a Glance, is intended in some ways to be the big overview, the main dashboard, and has been primarily used to help influence course design. So it's looking at what are the tools and things that are being used in the course, how are your students engaging with those, how are the students engaging with the course itself, how are they beginning to use this information to get their grades in and be able to now start that learning process. So what can you do better in your course to make it a more effective tool for them in their learning process? It looks at how students interact in terms of 3 areas: assessments, assignments, exams, blogs, wikis, any kind of gradable feature, including just those standalone grade center columns that you have not tied to any collection of work through Blackboard. Maybe you have class presentations, maybe you have team presentations or work or observational. You need to watch your students do something. I often think of lab reports where I don't have an artifact, but I can put a grade in. So assessments, with the level of assessments, one of the things that this tool does is it's going to look at the score of every student on that assignment. Okay? It's not going to go deeper. It's not going to go into row by row by row of a rubric or question by question of an exam. It's going to take the score, the overall score the student got on those in the grade center. And what it will do is over the course, it updates weekly, but as you get more and more assignments into the course, it will work with averages. It also looks at tools in the sense, what areas, and not specific tools, but that's something, again, if you want to know more specifically, then we can create a report that begins to drill down into that. But it looks at how students are engaging in tools, and it's looking at how students are engaging in content areas. So static, files, folders, opening those types of things. It looks at access, which is not clicks, but did they even go to your course? So often we have students sign into Blackboard, but did they go to your course or somebody else's course? Or did they go to Blackboard for something entirely different? So access is, did they open, how often are they opening your specific course site? Time in the course, how long the student is exploring and participating in activities in the course.
The course is just open, right? I mean, because for sometimes I think that it's counting when my students open the course and they're not doing anything inside of it.
That's all really access is. Did they actually go to your course? So, you know, if a student logs in,
not the access,
list,
the time in the course.
The time. Yes.
So they could leave it open, and it's not necessarily,
yes.
because you say exploring and participating, but they may not be.
They may not be entirely.
Okay.
Right. And then, but we get then also to the interaction, where now we're beginning to look at, well, did they go from the home page to the assignment link to a particular assignment inside the course?
Can I ask a question about that too?
Yes, there you go. Go ahead.
Does Blackboard automatically log students out after a certain amount of time?
It used to, and
Okay.
now it will. There is a time that you can set on the admin side that will do that.
Okay. So I'm just wondering,
Right, like
students
forever.
who keep their tab keep their tab on their computer with. So I think there's a good point about analytics, is that
Yeah.
all the data can be useful, but you also need to take it with a slight grain of salt, because if a student leaves and watches a movie and the tab's open for 2 hours, that doesn't
Right.
necessarily mean that they have been actively reading your course for 2 hours. So
Right. Opened another browser window,
Yeah.
did something else,
yeah,
but left it open. Right. Good question. And that's where then the other piece, though, does get to their activity, and that's the submissions. So now we're looking at, well, how frequently, once they've gone to the course, are they actually participating in the discussion board, submitting an assignment, doing a test or a survey, a journal or a blog or a wiki. And so you have all of those pieces that it is then beginning to calculate here, and it is doing it for you first, but then in comparison to your colleagues in your program or college. This requires, in terms of setup, too, we have to know where you belong in the institution. So you may be in the School of Business, but in the e-commerce program or department, whereas Stacy, you are in arts and sciences perhaps, and in the art history department. So it's not going to compare the two of you, but it will compare you to your other art history colleagues and to the College of Arts faculty, but primarily at this level drills just to your colleagues in the department. And again, you may be teaching a foundational course where others are teaching other types of courses as well. Okay? Clear on that? And so you get a sense, like in your presentation earlier, you were leading way above the average of your colleagues. Now, what do we do with that information? Mm-hmm.
And actually, we can know exactly which modules, which courses are lacking interactivity, and we can check on that. Check with the purpose of improving student engagement in order to be reflected on that average.
So it begins to give you insight into how things are happening within your course, but then you think about how, going back to what I talked about at the first session this morning, how does your course fit into the overall program? What might be the objectives and goals of the program in terms of maybe the blended initiative, or simply the use of Blackboard for all students? And even thinking about that, if we're considering, as we talked in the second presentation, about orienting students, if you're the only course really that's using this tool, then when students come to you, they probably will not be prepared, and you will need to do that. Where in arts, let's assume you have, at the beginning, you've all agreed that all the foundational courses are going to introduce students in some ways to Blackboard, because you as a department have agreed that this is important and we need to expand it out. So as you build that orientation and perception of how useful this tool is to what we do, then as faculty come after you, the orienting is easier. And actually, we should have more of an evenness going through that comparison. Although I do believe that there will be some types of courses where it will be required that students are logging in more frequently. So that gets us back to, why do students go to your course? So, like with yours, everything's there. I really could not do your course and be successful without going there. I would fail. But what if I'm still giving handouts in class? What if the textbook isn't an ebook? What if my exams are paper? Why do I go to the course? So everything has a context, has a broader context that we need to think about as we interpret the data. But this is a good way to start thinking about at the department level, what is the role of the LMS in the overall department's schema and vision and goals, and not just maybe in perhaps a blended learning context, unless the department has decided to go that way. Okay? The other, with some of this too, right here, these are grayed out student names. But just as we have some of this information at a high level, I can start digging down and now start looking at each one of my students and looking at relationships between them. So the green arrows mean things are improving. Sideways white arrow there means there's kind of a status quo, there's not a significant change. And then a red arrow meaning there's been a decrease in this particular activity. And in relation to, you can always see averages and kind of a peer concept. But again, why students need to go to the course, what is there for all of them that they need to be able to access and get to, or is this kind of a special need? Only at practice items are there, or only assignments. I only have to turn in an assignment. Other than that, I wouldn't necessarily need to do that. So when I talk to faculty about using this kind of report, it can be very valuable, but I need to understand as a faculty member what I believe the purpose of my course is for my students. This can tell me then if my students are underutilizing it, not perhaps performing well, not going to my course, then my question becomes what?
Subtracting the graph that you have, because sometimes there's a bias in the graph you have, because based on what you put in the, how much time the student had to go and how much time you had to go to Blackboard and use how much.
Right.
It depends on the instructor, it depends on.
Yes.
So this thing could be a bias if you don't give enough information or enough contents. Yeah.
Right. And this is where, if I truly believe as an instructor that a student should not be able to do very well in my course without going to it, but yet perhaps they are, I need to ask, how is that possible, or what do I need to do to make my site more valuable to my students? or easier to use, or what is the reason they're not going? Or even the opposite extreme, they're going there all the time, way more than I thought they needed to go. So often this asking and analyzing kind of go together. We need to make sure that we have a sense of what we think the purpose of our course is, how we've designed it in a way to be useful for the student, and then let some of this guide us into places we need to be more effective. And that's why typically this one has also often been used to inform course design. So again, if my students are perhaps in here a long time and I'm thinking, wow, that's a lot more time than necessary, maybe it's because they can't find what I think they should easily find. Maybe my menu is not clear in the way I've named things or folders, or I've too many deeper levels in to get to the actual thing, content piece or item that they're looking for. Okay? So this is the overall. And then again, this insight into individual students, you can begin to look here to see whether high-performing students are using the courses you might expect or not, or low-performing students. Questions? Comments?
I feel like when you said, well, if I do not go to, if I do not become very engaged online, I might not pass. I gave the option to my students because my students are actually coming with a mindset, and they have been spoon-fed in traditional courses and
Right.
traditional classes. And in order just to get them from that extreme to the other extreme is too much.
Yes.
So those who were used to get a PDF and study that PDF before they come to discuss something, I provided that.
Okay.
So that was an option in there that, yes,
Okay.
you can go and get that PDF and study it, and you can just go ahead. But the online part of the videos, well, when I stand and I start talking, I say things that are not written in any PDF or any
Yeah.
or any PPT, and that's gonna be lost in there. If by chance, not intentionally, that thing is opened in the face-to-face discussion, that student is going to feel that there's something missing. And if he or she cares about that and asks, I would say, okay, that wasn't really written in the PDF, because I shared with you, with my colleagues, that exceptional case that a student with low interactivity and engagement was getting A's. And that was the reason.
Well, maybe also though she has experiences or background that would have made it easier for her to relate to some of the information that you were providing, whereas perhaps not so for some of the others.
Because
be.
to me, that's what she said.
Yeah.
She said, I'm
Just-
more into PDFs and I read PDFs. And
So-
I'm getting
Yes. So this gets into another issue. How do students learn? Yes. You know, some read. I'm still one, I like to read it. Better than just listen. And yet others, they do better listening. Some of us can sit, never take a note. We're fine. Others, we're scribbling away. There's something about that processing of the writing and trying to write down as you hear that helps us learn. And to not be able to do that, we're going to have a hard time. So I think in the one hand, giving the PDF plus the video, you're hitting several learning modalities there, which is what we want.
Actually, I agree with you 100%. And in my teaching, I give my students the opportunity to use any tool, any media by which they can reflect their understanding. Even if it's a blended learning course, okay, I give them the opportunity to present their ideas in different ways and means. And by which, by this approach, I can guarantee maximum level of participation from my students' side. And don't limit things to things that you feel as an instructor is the best way to present ideas.
Interesting. I would really like to see that in practice. I love it. And it must sometimes be challenging for you as well to perhaps get some unorthodox ways of getting the information back to you. But that's partly when we developed courses with faculty, we always ask them, if you are going to do a video, you should also provide the full transcript. And then you can also provide a shortened PDF version that doesn't have all the words in there, but has those key ideas. Many of our faculty chose, just as Dr. Hassan in some ways, make the PDF available. It becomes now a learning tool that they can then watch the video later, perhaps at points that they're not quite clear, or watch it just as they would listening to a lecture, but have the guide of the PDF to kind of supplement and make perhaps connections for them that they wouldn't have made. So multiple modalities is always a really good thing. But coming back to interpretation of this kind of data is understanding what your purpose was. What was your intent with this course? What did you hope it would achieve for you from an instructional perspective, but also from the learner's perspective? And then, are you seeing what you expected? And where are you not? Like with the student who didn't log in much, but yet did wonderful in the class. And then digging deeper into that as you go forward. The other one that is very popular with clients and faculty that have the analytics tool is this course access and grade scatter plot. Because if nothing else, it kind of gives you a high-level visual of where your students are. I don't think we're seeing quite a bell-shaped curve up there, right? No.
That was my case. If
Yeah.
I remove the too good and the too, things.
You do have?
The bias.
Yep. Right. So this one, again, when you think about two, there's no names initially. No identifying, they're just dots on a graph. So whatever preconceived notions we might have about student X or student Y, I can't bring that quite to that yet. But I get a sense that I have quite a range to begin with. I have somebody way out there doing exceptionally well, and then some that are not, and then this in between kind of grouping. But this one is really beginning to look at, asking us to look at, how are students doing within the course, their behaviors. So we have, here's on this axis, we have their scores. And remember again, what Blackboard is looking at is the assignment score of the student on whatever assignment it is, points out of possible. And taking these and averaging, so if I'm at week 1, they might all be really close together. But then as the course starts going, it's adding in over the week. It's like you're running gradebook total for every student. Yes. Yes. And it updates weekly. So again, starting early in the term, probably not much distribution. And then as we start moving across the term, we get that differentiation. And that's where then here we're looking at access, their engagement within the course. What is interesting, or what faculty tell me they find most interesting about this is, again, I can't bring any preconceived notions about who these individuals are, but I can click on the little blue dot and find out who that student is and what their average is. And then this may tell me, oh yeah, I know that student. Her work is really, really good. She's been getting lots of, good grades in my course, where maybe these students, when I open up and look at their names, I might also be saying, yeah, they're kind of mediocre. They haven't been answering the questions in class. I might expect them to be there. Or you could be surprised in a way that they're at that level again. So they're not, 60% is not, our course grade is not exceptional, but they're also not putting a lot of time into the course. And that may be okay for them. But this, again, what most faculty have always commented on is it just very quickly, very succinctly gives them an idea of where the student range is. So when you look at this, if you were to think of those dots as your students in your courses, what would you want to know? How would you use this information?
Do you mind if...
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in our version, if you hover over a dot, the name of the person appears.
Yes.
And the student ID and everything. Well, I expect this to be a perfect straight line, right? If they perfectly correlate, then it's going to be straight line. That is the impossible situation, that it's perfectly, more engagement is going to be reflected immediately on your grade progress. But I just click on the extreme cases. I go to a dot
outliers.
that is having low course accesses, and it's 80%. Right. It's all the way in the top. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to investigate which parts of the course this student is active on. And the same thing with the other extreme, that they have high engagement and very low grade. In this case, there are not many. It's just about normal. But having a high grade and low engagement, you have many up there that you can. I actually talk to them and
Okay.
Just
To find out.
to find out what's happening here and what kind of things on my online components that
Yes.
need to be improved in order to just get rid of these exceptional situations.
Right. If we have high scoring or, sufficiently people above or at the area that we think they should be doing in terms of grade performance, but very low engagement with their Blackboard or the course site, and then here I've put all this effort into building all this wonderful material and content, and they're not going to it? What does that tell me? Or could tell me? I mean, I spend hours on that PowerPoint and that video, and they're not using it.
Very quick interpretation for this scenario, that the content or the resources that I produced to enrich my course doesn't work in the proper way. So I need to reassess
Right.
what I did differently by maybe interviewing students,
Yes.
the
always.
extremes, and get their feedback about what I produced and how can I improve it for my future course.
That's right. So before the scatter plot ever kind of came into being, I used to ask quick surveys of my students, you know, what's working, what's not working, and all that. And so my angst over this, a lot of time on a PowerPoint, was true. And a new tool that I was using, I was going to make this wonderful learning material, get it out there for my students. It would really help them learn better. So I did. Spent hours, days, weeks. It felt like put it out. On my survey, because I was so proud of it, you know, I asked the question, well, how helpful was this? I got comments, I didn't listen more than a couple minutes. And I kept thinking, why? Well, later, when I really thought about their responses and kind of dug a little deeper too, it was because I was giving them the same content in class. I ended up really just kind of repeating myself. Unconsciously doing that, but so, yeah, they didn't need to go out there. A few did to review some things, but that had totally missed the mark on my part of that. So again, these kind of things, like you say, we can look at, well, where are places now, you know, that we can make changes to improve that. So in that scenario, simple enough, if I really want them to go out there and learn there, I should not be spending class time doing that. Yes, sir.
After they watch the video, to say that if they benefit from it 100% or from the previous introduction,
Could.
and you get the results and like, shall I spend time here or different groups?
Right.
Which way you like, for example, which way you like, watching the video, how much you benefit from it.
Right. And so in my own case, I did experiment a little bit. The next time, I made sure I am not giving them this information in my class, and made them go out. And some preferred, but these are the early days too of technology, preferred, you know, that would be better in a lecture. Others, though, found it very helpful because it addressed questions that they needed to know, but it was not really the main gist of the information I needed to send out. So after that, it became kind of an optional. It's extra. It does a little bit more than what I'm going to do in class, but if you don't watch it, you're probably not going to be penalized on any activity or anything. But again, all of this...
Can I comment on?
Yes,
yeah.
go ahead.
So I think we are still looking at a very unidimensional reason for that kind of. There could be several other things which could be at play. Yes, maybe it wasn't adding value.
That's right.
It may not be interesting enough, or
That's
it
true.
may not arouse their curiosity enough. May not have that much engagement. So there could be several design flaws, content
Absolutely.
flaws, several things here.
Yes, and that's the digging into this. So again, like, I would never show any of you that video that I created like 6 years ago. It is so bad. But that's just it. You know, it was too long to begin with for the kind of purpose it had. 10 minutes, it should have been 4. Was it engaging and pretty? Probably not. So there are things that as we dig in deeper, we do have to go back and look at not just purpose, but also what the product itself is. I mean, the beautiful thing today is we have so much more sophisticated technologies that we can use that are so much easier to be able to produce pretty high quality content on our own. And if the content, I mean, the content can be beautiful and still not serve the purpose. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm. So both of these reports exist today, right within your courses. If you are using the Grade Center, if you are collecting student work, if you are putting content, even if all you mean for your course to be is, as I often say, one of the first levels is a filing cabinet of course materials. You can find out if your students are retrieving those materials. And if they're not, ask why. Well, maybe one person prints it all out and they share. But it is being used. And again, helps us understand a little bit about the learner, a little bit about the course, a little bit about the design, but what do we want it to do, and what are we finding that is actually happening, and then digging deeper to find some answers. This one, except for the colors, I love too. While I think in paragraphs a lot, I have also over the years become, and for a very strange, I do not know why, I have become more of a visual learner. 10 years ago, I would not have said that. But I have increasingly graphs, colors like this, and your beautiful color-coded Grade Center, which is like my calendar. Those quick kind of reference points are extremely helpful to me. My husband would look at this and just go berserk and say, I can't make heads or tails of it. He is not a visual learner. For him, he needs the numbers in there. But the nice thing about this report is you ultimately can kind of get the numbers, but it gives us very quick, again, insight into how well our students are doing. And are they doing, and particularly when, again, these are just blocked out names, if you were to look at those individual students, are they performing in a way that you would expect as you get to know these students too? But this is, again, looking at the grades and activity and falling into those quadrants up there. What I have used this mostly is to find the red blocks, like there, here, and to see if there's any consistency with the student. So in this case, there's a student that has several of these little reddish blocks, and kind of periodically. And I might wonder if there's information and things that I've done, and this is where I think about the way I scaffold my assignments. So I start with maybe something that is a small piece, and then build the next, and then the next, and it's typically more and more challenging. Is this a student that can do really well on those early parts of the assignment, but when they really have to pull it together and now start getting to a higher level thinking, they stumble? And if so, if that were the case, what can I do with this student so they don't stumble there like that? And then blue you know, all these wonderful blue blocks here where this is probably, I'm either going to say an exceptional student, and that may be the, you know, for instance, the woman with the PDF, but they're just doing really well until what happened here, probably life, as I say, you know, in those cases. Something happened, she couldn't, or he couldn't get to that. But this gives me a notion, again, of how performance and activities and interactions all play in to my students' success. Now, I would ask you, if you thought of this, one of your courses, perhaps, some of your students, what would you begin to make of those blues, red, that block? That's your semester. There.
When Charles looked at, this chart, I think the day before yesterday, to be frank, when I used it, I did not pay attention to the third column in there. In each student, there is the interactions and the grades. But the third column is actually showing if that student is consistent or not when it comes to the relationship between grades and interactions. So we were looking for exceptions. If a student, his or her status is in the one of the exceptional quadrants in here, because high, high, and low, low.
Right.
What about high, low, and low, high? Yeah. So that's the exceptional situation. So we look at it and see, well, this needs more investigation. We can approach the student and say, but the blue, the red is crystal clear. Blue is great. Red is not surprising, but we need to approach that student as well.
Right.
Remediate. Why it's nothing here and nothing there. Grades are bad, and integration or engagement is bad. So to me, it's being visual to me is good. Okay, I like that. Maybe the colors are not really having high contrast, but there should be the possibility of customizing the colors, because I don't like a programmer just impose his or her color taste on me. I can change it the way I like.
Right.
And this should be there. And I think it's there, but I'm not at the level to get into that standard report and customize it, because we can do that. At the pyramid level, and we can go and customize things. And even when you said you like numbers, you can be given the option here to export that to Excel. And it's going to be an Excel sheet, and you play with the numbers the way you like.
Which is, again, Blackboard's attempt to deal with different kind of learning styles as well. From this, can you quickly identify your students at risk?
At risk.
Yeah. So if nothing else, even just glancing at this weekly, you could begin to see which students continue to be those that are at risk, which ones, like my example of the student that perhaps can't get to that next level, and be able to figure out how do we help them, or what do they need to this. Questions? The submissions report is, again, if we are looking at the various ways, that we leverage the course in the possibility of collecting student work, this begins to also give us some indication of who's completing the work, who is not completing the work, falling behind in their interactions and engagement with the course. So even like these numbers here, days since last submission, that may be actually fine because I'm looking at this way after the course ended. But if my numbers are high here since the last submission, and I know I have assignments and activities, even small ones, coming in weekly, then I could begin to be very concerned about students that are falling behind or waiting till the last minute, continually late with their work. This is one, too, that can be customized to a much more granular level as well, to help us better understand what kinds of activities and things that we're even using. For instance, I may have a heavily weighted discussion column every week and only a short writing assignment twice in the whole term, or discussion and then one big giant writing assignment at the end. And I may want to look at that and think, oh, I need to maybe space that out a little bit better, and more than one method of assessment.
And sorry to say that, very impressed with this report because, well, if I have an assignment or test, do my students have a choice? They must submit the test and they must submit the assignment, right? But when it comes to forums and other interactivities, it's optional. I would be more interested to look at statistics related to something that they have a choice to do or not to do.
Right.
I couldn't do that here.
No.
If I add a column there, assignment test, that's okay. But I add a column there for forums to just get at overall how students are getting. Well, in some other reports, they provide that piece of information.
Right.
But in this report specifically, I missed that, honestly.
Yeah. Question? Other thoughts?
Like in case, ahead of time, these students, they're not gonna, submit their work. Do you approach these students beforehand, guide them, or tell them that there's a deadline you have to submit? Do you show them these statistics or no?
So I would not go here to do that. There's another tool in the Learn courses called the Retention Center that can give me, I think, a quicker view of telling me who's behind, who's consistently late, grades are falling. Then within that Retention Center, I can actually send an email directly to the student. At our institution and for many of the programs, it was always the responsibility of the faculty member to make the initial contact with a student that is not performing well in the course. However, our advisors were becoming very highly engaged with students, and a new role for them of becoming more of a coach to the students. So faculty often copied the advisor directly there too. So that way the student has, you must, or you're going to fail, and then the advisor sees that and says, oh, wait a minute, this student has had something, let me talk to run interference a little bit, but let's keep the student on track as well. So I never wouldn't go that way. I would go to the other tool. And that, again, is part of making the choice of which tool is going to be the best for you to achieve what you need to do as well within the courses. Now, one of the key things, like with the learning outcomes and goals, as a faculty member, we're most interested in, well, where are my students struggling? Where are they still not getting it? And what can I do to help with that? Why might they be struggling? I'm not explaining things well. They don't have enough practice. Or even they're coming in at without the proper skills to be successful. And this is where often pre and post, kind of an assessment at the beginning. I know many faculty that give a very general assessment of students at the beginning of the term, and then we'll follow up at the end to see if they truly have moved along in what they know. And then always how can I help them? And this is where these two reports seem to really help us begin to address those two questions, key questions. Now, there are, once you begin to start using the learning outcomes area in Blackboard, which ties an assignment to a goal, a learning outcome or a course level objective, there's another built-in report right at the course level, which is this course performance. This is another one that I like because it tells me very specifically how each student is doing, and I can see easily who's underperforming my target. And I can set the target with this one. And I can see specifically what goals have been aligned to this one assignment or set of assignments within my course itself. So as departments in that start mapping, and I as an instructor just want to know, I can start running this kind of report for my students. Something new that is coming is again related to goals. And this gets to that bigger question of we have within the program certain number of program outcomes, and how, I keep clicking the wrong button, how well the student is coming along in meeting our program outcomes over their courses. So again, imagine as we move through these, if these students were all at the same place, then the little red, the half moons and all that would be there. But the red, yellow, and green tells us how well they're actually doing on those particular assignments that we have identified as assessment areas. And then we can get a sense here, oh, this student's, like right down here, they're further along. Yes, visually it shows that, but here I can see they're at number 15 out of 20. And so they're almost to the end of the program, where the others are not. How many more they have left to do, how many they don't have started. And then from here, actually being able to click on a student and see which ones are the 10 that they've completed, which ones are the 5 they have not completed. And of the 10 that they completed, how did they do on each one of those? This is part of our Student Insights package that is being developed, but only works in conjunction with the goal alignments, because you have to know what activities are aligned to the particular outcomes. Yes?
Just trying to think, does the average proficiency just include the completed assessments?
Yes.
Okay.
So the others are null until you actually submit something on that PLLO. Yeah. So this is something actually came out of a dental program, and their need to be able to see where their students were at certain points in time, because they didn't, after their third year, didn't have block, like you must do this, this, this. They could go all over the place. The other things that starts become with the learning outcomes that analytics can begin to give us are these 3 standard reports as well, where it builds a little bit off of the grade matrix, but now it's again only isolated to those assignments that have been tagged by your program or your course learning outcomes. So it's not all of the course now, but just whatever assignments have been in there, and wherever that goal might cross a program. But they're available, just waiting for the goals area. And these become drill downs. Here's where I can start looking at a list of students within courses. Here I start going up to now the school level, and then if I'm part of a multi-section, so my course has 23 clones of it with 23 different, each of us knew a different faculty, we can begin to see how those comparisons are happening too. Additionally, once people start using goals, they want a lot more information, and so these are the reports when we ask, like, what else would you like to know? This is now also just readily available. So I can start separating out goal performance, student performance by term, by academic area, by major. So this column here, when you start thinking about integrating with your SIS and pulling that, now we know what major a student is, we know other demographics about students, and we can start pulling a lot of that together. Activity, getting back to looking at the activity with analytics, we do have the submission report that we can tailor to get much more specific, and then our access report. But we also, part of this new, is now bringing this to the attention of the student. So those other reports have just been for us, the instructor, not a dashboard quite for the student. And we found with student focus groups that often a dashboard is more than they want, more than they can deal with. And so this tool has allowed schools to decide what they might want to show to a student right inside the course itself. So instead of the overall dashboard, here's how I'm doing in all my courses, no, this is how I'm doing it in this particular management course. And in that course, if I'm using forums, here's how I'm doing in terms of my relation to my peers, myself, and then my grades. And we have found from students, while this will never replace the grades book for them, their actual scores, just like it gives us a high-level view of where we are and doing, we've gotten a lot of positive feedback about this. These are things too, these are the start of what people have asked for and what students have asked for. As we know more about what they want, the information is in Blackboard, we just need to know what it is to be able to get it out. One that faculty have asked for that has not been visualized very well in those other reports at all is a quick way of knowing, I know I have a lot of papers to grade here, but really maybe if I'm teaching several courses, where do I have the most? Where can I spend? I have a chunk of time. Where can I really spend some time right on that? So here's, the 10 lists that have been sitting in there. So when we think about formative feedback, getting back to students, maybe those have been sitting in my grade center too long and I really need to attend to them. Also, students who are absent, who are consistently most absent in your courses. We have an attendance tool. So usually we leverage and suggest the attendance tool, not access. But these would be, if I'm teaching a series of courses over the fall, these would just be my students in the courses that I teach. And then again, all of these, like you click on a particular student, you jump right to the place you need to grade it. So looking at efficiencies that can help you as a faculty member. The other thing with the tool is looking at course materials. Again, we've kind of looked at the course at a glance, but there are other tools that work as well. One is surveys, and being able to rely on them to give us some input into how students are learning, how they perceive that they're learning, and then digging into analysis that comes with Blackboard at this level that will help us begin to get a sense of the quality of our exams and the quality and use of our rubrics. But we also have tools that dig even deeper into this. So if schools are interested in really getting to a much more granular kind of look at their exam data, then this tool is part of our primary assessment tool, but it has a very, very robust item analysis aspect that starts bringing in your KR20 scores, your p-values, point by serial, Chromback with deletion. So here, even as I have just given this exam, it's telling me here in red, I have a couple questions here that, you know, actually I'd have a much more reliable exam if I took those out. So often for schools that have licensure, we start getting this need to dig even deeper, and again with goals, being able to find out how students are performing on goals, and the same with rubrics, being able to get a lot more into the whole process of scoring and the quality of the instrument itself, all the way down to the individual student and their performance on individual goals. Now, for pyramid, usually that is, and typically at institutions, that is not a tool individual faculty have. And that's, so this is where the ask, the best advice I have is you've all taught, and especially those in the blended, you have gone through a semester almost. Go in and look at those reports and see if they are giving you the kind of information you want. And if they're not, what do you want? Because that other tool that's more of an administrative tool, that's where we can really dig into specifics, like who's reading my rubric, how many students are not, who's using my practice quizzes, you know.
We had a discussion on this a little bit, and we were talking about how the tools analytics in this is so generic that it's almost useless for me, you know, to know, okay, how many submissions do they do? Well, I can see that. That's in the grade report. So that doesn't make any sense for me. So then I want to know more with this, the details on which things are accessing and for how long, like which tools, which, you know, and then how long they're accessing them for, or what time or whatever.
And that report is often an IT report to begin with, or an education or CETL report. So we've been doing all these training on all these wonderful tools. Who is really using them out there? And then we can begin to extrapolate and now make it more of a standard report for faculty to build, you know, to look at more carefully. Because that is what you want to know. Are they using, what are they using? How are they using it? Yeah, it could. But I think the bigger point of all of this, while we could throw a bunch of tools at you of an analytics and give you a whole bunch of data, stacks of it, the real question is what is going to be most helpful for you to help you begin to make improvements in the design of the course, in the activities that you deliver, in the kind of materials that you build to help your students?
I would like to comment on the tools issue, because it depends on what you mean by tools. If what you mean is the link to which you go to the arsenal of third-party software, like Panopto, Cortex, VitalSource, Collaborate. So all these are third-party applications. They have their own analytics, but that's not actually linked to the data warehouse built by Blackboard. So that's one. Two, I would like just to mention that there are 3 levels of reporting when it comes to, Blackboardians are aware of this, of course. 3 levels of reporting come from Analytics for L. The first and the most direct is the ones integrated within your own course section. And that's what we call integrated reports.
Okay.
And another level of reports, which is the structured query language, the SQL report.
The pyramid, yes.
And these are standard reports, hundreds of them. They go across courses, right? And they provide standard dashboards to chairs and deans. And actually, I have on my plan to present that to the regular faculty members to know what is reported across courses and how the comparative analysis is provided on these reports. The topmost level reporting is coming from pyramids, which is an open kind of reporting logic. You can come up with your own report, you can customize it, and you can put it either privately, that can be accessible by only you as instructor, or admin can put that publicly in order to be accessed by whoever decided to be. And that is coming because we're piloting A4L, but we need to build the awareness with it.
Right. And the need, and this is where Blackboard, yes, has I think over 500 various reports. And when we first started, it was, oh, you want learner data and analytics? Here, 500 of them. Go figure it out. Yes, it's just data. So now they're in there, but really it's waiting for you, the faculty member. What do you really need that's going to help you? Sometimes that can be organizationally, culturally dependent, contextual again, specific needs of different professions and disciplines have for their accreditors as well, specific data they need to pull out. A lot of analytics, when you look at its processing of grades, it's averaging and taking the whole score, never digging down enough to get to individual rubric rows, but that's where now the goals start helping pull out more specific granular type data on that. So in many ways, it's, yes, building awareness, but thinking, what's going to be most helpful to you? It's back to step 1, asking, what would you like to know? And see if this can start down that and then refine it. Because the query tool is quite powerful once we kind of know where and what you need. And showing to the faculty, I think, is a great idea so that everyone understands what is being reported out and potentially then to how it is used, the data governance levels. Yeah. Questions? Thoughts? Comments? No? Well, thank you for sitting through 3 of these. You are wonderful people. Thank you very much.